Thank you. Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for coming, and those of you who are listening at home. This is a regularly scheduled Committee of the Whole meeting. Today's date is Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. I will now call this meeting to order. We have 5 councilors present and 1 absent, and so because we have an absentee, would you please take the roll call?
Beerbu,
Present.
Friedlieb,
Here.
Paulson is absent, Beyondich,
Present.
Johnson,
Here.
Baranzelli, Huffy.
Present. We have a quorum. Thank you. We have a full agenda item today, so I'll turn this portion of our Committee of the Whole meeting over to our City Administrator, who is seated in the back, and she'll operate the agenda as we need fit, and if we need to move it around, we'll certainly do so. So appearances is number 1, Dana Hilton in from Virginia HRA. Britt? Coming up, if you have the green light isn't already on, please turn it on. Thank you. Welcome, Dana and Gigi from the HRA regarding the Washington Manor budget. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. Our finance manager's out ill today, so I'll be reviewing the budget with you. I can try to answer any questions that you have, and if there's anything that I need to get back to you on, I sure can. And then I also need to talk to you a little bit about what is going on up at Washington Manor with the heating system, so that you're fully aware of the condition of that right now. Okay.
I was up there with your maintenance guy the other day.
Oh, so you got to see.
When we were up there doing the tour there and during the holidays, he took me downstairs, so.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Please continue.
So first in your packets, you'll see the budget. I'll walk through the main line items with you so you can see where you're at for the projection on our fiscal year of April through March. You can see in the top total operating revenues. The first column is what our budget is this year for a final of 3/31 of 22. And then the other columns are a proposed no increase, 1% increase, 1.5, a 2, and a 3. So when you see the total operating revenues, you can see current budget is 677.27. We're projecting revenues that range from 702.405 with no increase to 721.808 with a 3% increase. I will make note in there, you can see in there the line item of cable. In the past, the City Council did approve us to increase cable costs to tenants as we get those increases. Those are usually about this time of year. We have received some projected numbers. We think that cable is going to increase at least 10%. So in this budget, we estimated cable to be at about $50 for tenants per month, going up from $44. As you know, we don't have any control about that whatsoever. So just keep that in mind also, that people's cable will be going up. Then you can see total administrative expenses are $53,810. We have total utility expenses at $83,700. Obviously, you know that there are some increases in utilities, including water this year. There was a 25% increase, so we did budget for those increases. In maintenance and contracts, we have total maintenance expenses at $210,410. I think you can see there's a couple line items that are probably increasing a little bit more than others. One is maintenance employee expenses. We are having a very difficult time filling positions over at the HRA. We're having an extremely difficult time with maintenance positions. So we're also going into a negotiating year, so we're accounting for that in the budget right now. We also have really good occupancy up at Washington Manor, which usually means a little bit more of a need for maintenance there. So, and then materials are also up. Some of that is due to we've coded things just a little bit differently this year between materials and your capital improvements. And so there's a few other things that go into materials, but then the cost of materials obviously are also increasing. So we have, total general expenses at $30,830 for total operating expenses of $378,750. We always put a line item in there for capital improvements. We use about half of that on turnovers for different things, like we turn it over, we have to do flooring, we have to do other things like that to get the unit ready. And then we usually try to set aside the other portion of that for upcoming capital improvements that you need. So total operating expenses and repair and replacement expenses coming in at $428,750. So you can see the bottom net income line item ranges from, if you have no increase, negative $73.75. 1% increase would come out at negative $907. A 1.5% increase, $23.27. 2%, $55.61, and a 3% at $12,028. You will also see in your packets that there's, the next page has the rent history on here. You can see you've really tried to keep rents down over at Washington Manor. You know, really showing in the last 10 years, 1.5%, 2%. It shows the proposed current rent increases. So right now your rents are $721 to $1,088, depending upon the size of the unit, 1 bedroom to 2 bedrooms. And then what a 1.5%, 2%, and 3% increase would be. Just to kind of also give you an idea, the current fair market rent, which is not market senior rent, on a 1 bedroom right now is $715, and on a 2 bedroom is $936. That went up quite a bit in this last year. And then the next page, you can see your Washington Manor vacancies. So we've had a really good, I think, occupancy rate still there again this year, even considering kind of dealing with COVID and people not wanting to move for a little while. We came out at 97.35%. That does not include the caretaker or guest suite units. And then the last page in your packet shows the budgeted income statement for where we're at right now. 8 months ended at the end of November. So what budget questions do you have for me before I think, or unless you want me to also talk about the heating issues before you talk about budget?
Yeah, would you just continue with the heating issues first, and then I will ask Sherry about what we as a city owe still approximately on the Washington Manor, and then we'll go to the counselor, which first would be Counselor Johnson. Please continue. That may give us some information regarding the decision we make with respect to your request.
Okay. So on January 10th, we were having some problems, we thought, with what was the steam trap up there. If you remember, or I'm not sure if you remember, but the heating system up there, there's steam that comes into that building. It goes through a coil, heats hot water. The hot water is then generated to all of the units in the building, and then it's a forced air system off of that. So we were having some issues with what we thought was a steam trap, just like a couple days. Then we knew that it was something a little bit more than that. We had a contractor come over on January 10th, JK Mechanical. They confirmed that our steam bundle was leaking. And so it actually, over like a weekend, had, when I say leaking, I mean severely leaking. I'm not talking like, hey, we have just a little leak out of the steam bundle, we're waiting on it. It is severely leaking. So I had them price out a new Taco steam to hot water tube bundle. We ordered it immediately because this is a pretty serious emergency. Our maintenance employees started to check the lines that night. Like every single hour, we were filling the line in the building to keep water flowing through the system because that's how much water we were losing. So January 11th, JK came in and they installed a new steam regulator and an autofill in the system, which has allowed the system to constantly feed water into the system a little at a time at a slower pace than dumping a lot of water into the system every hour. So that helps us try to keep the temperature up. January 14th, JK tracked down some gaskets for us for the current bundle in case we get to a point where we need to actually try to take the bundle apart and repair it, because the bundle is out 4 weeks. We cannot expedite getting this bundle from Taco. We've tried. And so that, I feel like that is just kind of the situation in the world that we're in right now with different parts. We can't get them. You know, a part that we maybe used to be able to get in a few days, now we can't get for at least 4 weeks. So our plan right now is that we are limping along. We are trying to make sure that we can keep our hot water up to a point where at least it can provide heat to most of the units. We've been around the 130 to 140 mark. We really want to be at the, like when the system is running well, it's at the 180 to 190 mark. So that kind of tells you. We have a couple end units that maybe don't get quite as much heat, and we're supplementing those right now. But we totally depend on this bundle. This bundle helps us heat every single unit. We do have other types of heat in the hallways and in the garage, and so we've turned those up also to try to, help with the building, help keep it heated. But that's pretty much where we're at. I did talk to the PUC last week because, like I said, we're losing a lot of water in the system every day. So obviously that's going to have a cost effect on utilities as well. So they're aware of that, and hopefully we'll be talking about some adjustments for the building on that. And then to top that all off, we have so much water coming out of the system, and then we had a plug in the line in the basement that was draining it out. So last week, we had a ton of water and steam in the basement area, and nobody could really quite figure out how to get that clear. So Eddie's in the audience, thank goodness. Public Works has been trying to help us, and so they've been there a couple days. They're there again today. It is I have to say, I've been down there just about every day in the last couple of weeks, and it's much better down there today, or in the last few days, than it was last week. So we're not trudging through multiple inches of hot water on the floor anymore. And they're gonna try to get it drained out. They're gonna try today. He's not smiling because he's not totally confident, but he's been a lifesaver, right? Public Works has been a total lifesaver. They brought a pump over, we were pumping out over the weekend. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, so aside from the potential increase in utility rates, what the money that you have to put out for these repairs through J&K, that comes out of your contingency fund, correct? Or whatever you have left over. So I guess I would ask you before we go to Councilor Johnson, what does that cost so far to you?
Yeah, so the bundle and putting the bundle in is gonna be in right around, I think it was $74.40. I did a contract for that immediately and approved that because we had to get it ordered. That's coming out of this current year's budget.
$7,440. Okay, thank you.
And that's coming out of this year's budget, and there's enough in the line items to do that. So we've already kind of got that accounted for. I have not been billed for the other work yet that happened on the day when they were putting in the autofill system, putting in the new steam regulator, trying to make sure that that could get to a point where we could try to limp along here.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you. One question on page 5 of our packet. When the budget, the third column over the budget, is that 8 months in, or is that the total annual budget?
Are you on the budgeted income statement, or are
Yes.
you on
The budgeting, income statement.
the 8 months ended is November 30th, so that's 66.6% through the budget year, because this budget runs on an April through March.
So the 624,000, is that the year? But so on that page, the third column over, it says 624,907. Is that 8 months in, or is that the total year budget?
Total year budget, 8 months in of expenses.
Okay.
So you can see on that then we're 71.8% of revenue, even though we're 66.7% through the year. And expenses are coming in.
I'm not seeing the budget, the percentages on that sheet.
I just calculated those.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Because that help, it helps because it says that we're 177,000 under budget, but there's still 4 more months to
Yeah.
divide that out. So that helps me to, I guess in the future, if we could put those percentages in, I know that's an option, and it looks like you're using QuickBooks or something like that.
No, it's actually, it's not QuickBooks, but.
Because it's hard to compare
Yeah.
when, if we had a year-to-date budget versus what we spent, that would be easier to compare where we're at. So
I can
that
just
was-
run it down for you if you want.
Oh, that's okay. I'll figure it out after. I trust your numbers. I know that you do a good job. And then the hard question I'm going to ask you is, what discussions have we had with the public utilities about not having steam anymore? Because we know that at some point the hospital's going to go off the steam, which means there's no steam to Northside. And I don't want to be spending thousands of dollars on something that's going to change out in 3 to 5 years?
That probably depends on if the city continues to own Washington Manor or not, and that's probably a discussion that the city needs to also have with the PUC.
I think I would like to see us start that conversation somehow with them about, because it is our building right now, and I'm guessing the coil fix is probably temporary too, looking at what else is gonna go on up there as the steam. One of the challenges we had at the old miners building was we had to have the connection custom made so that we could keep the steam going until we built the new building. And I'm guessing any custom made anything for the Washington Manor is gonna be more than 4 weeks out. And unfortunately, it happened now. So if we can make sure we're starting that conversation, I don't know if that, Charlie, if that's for you to do, or Britt, if that's an email we need to send about what the conversion looks like for city property on north side. So, and I think I'd like to have that conversation at some point when we, because, you know, if unless we're gonna sell it within that 5 years, you know, we need to get ahead of the game on this, just like everybody else. There's getting furnaces for homes is almost impossible, let alone a multi-unit apartment building. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I got some information from Sherry that we requested earlier about what the projected, what we owe yet on the balance sheet with respect to the Washington Manor. And currently, we still owe $1,315,000. And if we continue on the path based on the when we refinanced a while back, we anticipate this will be paid off in 2026, just for the council's information. Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Baraboo?
Yeah, just for your information, Steve, the next Public Utilities meeting is the 24th of this month, Monday next week. So I will be there. I can forward and we can start the conversation at, or we can send a letter. I think we should send a letter anyway on this issue to the utilities to make sure they can continue to help out as needed. So, and they've been pretty good about that, Dana.
Yeah, actually, they provided us the steam regulator. They had it on the shelf
Oh, okay. So that helped.
for us. So we're replacing that for them. And so, yeah, they've been helpful so far. And like I said, I have had an initial discussion about the usage up there right now. They haven't, gotten back to me or decided on how they're going to handle that, but hopefully they'll be willing to work with us.
Okay. The company that's ordering the parts for you, those parts aren't obsolete? They can get them, is that my understanding?
Well, they're being made.
They're
It's
being made, okay. So it'll be probably a good cost to that.
Well, that's the cost to have the bundle and installed is $74.40.
Oh,
Like I
okay.
said, we have some costs that are additional to that for the work that they already did that I had to have them just do without even, getting a price on it beforehand. So I'm expecting, I don't know what that's going to come in, another maybe.
Well, it's an emergency, so you just have to live with it and figure out where we can find the money for it.
Right.
All right, thank you for that information.
Thank you, Councilor Baraboo. So the question for us is, and we see no other councilors cited on right now, you have a proposal for us to consider, no increase, all the way up to 3%. And knowing that these are issues that we've experienced in the past, we've had to put a new generator and that, you had to wait for that. We delayed, because we're trying to find the money. We took care of that. The city owns that building. We still owe $1.3 million upon that and some change. And so we have an obligation to make sure we maintain the integrity of the maintenance and the service of that building. Until we sell it, we are responsible for it. So as you, as our agent operating the facility, you make your recommendation based on the budget projections and what you need, not only in the short term, but in the long term over at least the next fiscal year. So my ask to you is, what is your recommendation? I know we put you on the spot here, but I think you had discussed with your finance and moving forward, what would you be your recommendation? Looking at what the industry standard is for 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments, we're kind of in that ballpark area.
Can't recommend anything but 3%.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, anybody else have any questions, concerns, or comments Is there anything else that you'd like to add to your presentation before we move forward with some, hopefully some council action?
Not at this point. I think the only thing maybe is that you obviously know you've got other capital improvements that need to be made up at that building. And
Yes.
so right now too, like our plan here is pretty much just like it was last year. Save as much as we can during the operating year, see what we can come up with by the end of the year with our projections and build your reserve so that we can try to address the next capital project we need to address.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. Of Councilor Bearable, and then back over to Councilor Johnson. Councilor Bearable.
Sherry, what are the reserves left for that building? Do you know the amount that is? Yeah. How much?
Some information on that if you want me to walk through.
I think I gave it to Dana last week, but
So you hold a debt reserve of $150,000, and then you also hold a restricted repair reserve of $40,000. Those are both restricted reserves, okay? So in addition to that, you also we have cash and investments held at the HRA of about $96,000. The city held right now is $611,909. But of course, you have a payment coming up on your bond. You have to make sure that you still set aside enough in your, operating reserves, things like that. So even though your total reserves, restricted and unrestricted, right now today are probably around like $800,000, $823,000, you have the debt payment, your annualized debt, restricted debt service, operating reserves, security deposits, and restricted repair reserves, which probably leaves about $170,000.
Okay, thank
Of
you.
unrestricted.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you. Sherry, what is our annual bond payment, or we pay by the month, we pay by the month, do we not? Or is it annual?
it's an annual.
So what is the annual payment approximately?
Got it.
You got that?
So February debt payment is $263.15.
$263,015.
Yes.
Thank you, Dana. Councilor Johnson.
That was going to be my question too, is what do we have? And I'm guessing that because of some of the stuff going on right now, there's not going to be any carryover from this year to put into our reserves because of what's happening currently.
Well, actually, we've done pretty well in the budget this year of sticking to it, and we've had pretty good revenues. So that's why we have built up even the HRA held reserves. So we are going to carry some over.
Okay.
And even with this heating issue, barring a larger disaster, okay? So, I can't tell the future on that, but, so we are going to carry some over. It's just obviously not enough to address some of the other issues up there yet. Unless you do something like decide to spend all of your operating reserve, which I could not recommend that, but that's an option.
Thank you, Dana. Anything further, Councilor Johnson?
Well, I know we need to make a move on this. And could you repeat again what the market rate of a one-bedroom was?
Yeah, so fair market rents for 2022 is $715 for a one-bedroom, $936 for a two-bedroom. So that's considered an affordable rent. That's not like a senior market rate. That's affordable. I'll tell you too, our rates up at Laurentian Manor are pretty much in line. I think you're a little lower on some of your one-bedrooms. We're a little higher over at Laurentian. Our top end might be just a smidge lower than yours. But we're kind of right in there, and the HRA is considering the Laurentian Manor budget this afternoon, and I can't imagine that there won't be a rate increase.
I guess I want to be cognizant that that there are human beings paying rent, but also I want to be aware that it's an aging building. Even though it's been remodeled for apartments, it's still several years aging. We just did a bunch on the outside, and if I remember right, the roof is in need of some help. And based on that, I guess I would make a motion that we go with the 3%, understanding that we are going to be able to hopefully put 12,000 plus into reserves for future, hopefully not emergency repairs and maintenance of the building.
Thank you. It's moved by Counselor Johnson to recommend a rate increase at the Washington Manor for rent at 3% across the board. Is there support? Is there support?
All support for further discussion, Mayor.
Support for further discussion. Further discussion, I have one item for discussion, and that is, would that include the rate increase for the cable as well? Is that all encompassing? So you're going to look for a motion for a separate motion increase or not?
No, actually, the city last year just approved us to increase cable rates
As needed.
as Mediacom raised them.
Very good, thank you very much. So we're going to be cognizant of those rate increases as well. All right, thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Anyone have any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
You. Do the people who reside in that building, are they aware of the challenges for keeping that building running smoothly?
I think that we try to keep them somewhat aware of the challenges and they see what's going on around them. Like in the last couple of weeks, for example, even, there's no way that you can't see that Public Works is pulling in a few times. We've got water pumping out. We have a maintenance person there every single hour through the night for 24 hours checking it. You know, I mean, you see some of that stuff. They know that. Do people in property management always understand what that totally means and what it takes to operate a building like this? Probably not unless you're in it.
And the only reason I'm asking is I get messages and they're often, why are you doing this? What is going on? You're raising costs. So if there was any way we can inform the public of what is going on with that building and why the rate increases are happening. And I understand people want to keep these older buildings going, but I don't think they realize the cost of keeping those buildings functional. So I would like to somehow let the public know, not only the residents in that building, but throughout our city, that these costs, we just don't make these decisions lightly. There's a reason that we have to do this. So that is my concern, is the people in the building, if they understand what is happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. And I received a number of calls from the residents there. I actually went and visited two of the members that were there. And we talked about, you know, they're aware of the budget. They're aware that this is the time of year where it's anticipated that there's going to be a request to increase their rates. They don't like it. But at the same time, their concerns were this group of people that I spoke to, that, you know, we want to be able to live in a building that, you know, we want it fixed so that, you know, we have our health and safety is at post. And I said, well, we're going to be talking about that at the committee of the whole meeting. We'll have to make a recommendation. It'll be based upon, whatever decision will be based upon making sure that your health and safety is first and priority, and that we pay, you know, for your costs associated with that. They seem to be happy with. They don't want the rate increase, but understand it, at least to some degree. So, thank you. So it has been moved and supported to increase the rental rates across the board for the Washington Manor at 3%. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please, Pam.
Friedlieb,
No.
Paulson is absent. Beyondich. Johnson,
Aye.
Aaronzelli. Cuffey,
I don't want to, but aye.
Baraboo.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-1 with one absent. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Anything else to come before us? Gigi, anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it. Thank you. Britt?
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approved purchase of a dump truck with sander and plow for the Public Works Department.
Mr. Alto? Morning. And I see Mr. Rosvit is in the audience as well. Jim, you want to come up? You must have put like 80,000 miles on it in the last few weeks, huh? All right, please, welcome. Thank you.
This is the truck we've talked about already. This is going to be 2021 pricing. It's still under 2021 state bid list. The cab and chassis is from Midstate, which is the old Scubix, for $102,666.48. And the plow, sander, all hydraulics, all the controls comes from Chris Steele down in Fridley. This is another state bid list. It's $95,792. Should be in your packet. This now won't be delivered till 2023, which is when it was budgeted. But we're getting it underneath 2021 pricing.
Yeah, so for $197,000 and change, we're ordering it now for delivery in 2023, in which we have it budgeted for in that year.
Correct.
And I understand the need to do so ahead of time. You know, a lot of times I think there's been some discussion about make sure you have the money right now before we order it, but we're being fiscally prudent in that responsibility moving forward, so I'm supportive of it. Counselor Johnson.
On page 31 in our packet, it says tow hooks. I know that can be kind of important. Is that going to be included on this one, or?
I'm sorry, say again?
Tow hooks?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Front and
it just was on here, so I wanted to make sure that,
Absolutely.
and what is the total cost?
Tow hooks are included in the truck price.
Okay.
Reason being, if it gets stuck,
Yeah, no, I wanted to make sure that it was, I saw that on there, so I wanted to make sure that, what is the grand total that we need to approve? I want to make sure my motion is correct.
197,000 change, and what is it exactly, Pam?
95.
No, we're asking, is it,
total of both.
total of both is 197,000 some odd dollars, correct?
Correct.
So you would like the exact amount or right around there? Up to $200,000 or whatever?
Working.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, I want to make sure I get that number. So the 95, that's why I wanted to make sure.
102,666.48 for the truck, and for the plow is 95,792.
How about if I make a motion that we approve up to $200,000 to purchase this truck?
So moved by Counselor Johnson to approve the purchase of the, in the 2021 pricing for a truck to be delivered as budgeted in 2023, up to $200,000. Is there support?
I'll support, Mayor.
Support by Counselor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
Thank you. Ed, you said that the first part was coming from the old Scubik brothers,
It's called Midstate Trucking right now. It is Scubik Brothers. Yeah.
and the other part was coming from,
Chris Steele down in Fridley.
was
They're-
there anybody local that offered that, or?
Nobody local up here does that type of equipment, other than Duluth. We could have went to Duluth, but this is off state bid list.
Okay.
This is a company we've worked with for the last 20-some years. They've put together every truck I've done, actually.
Just
We're
wanted-
really familiar with them, and we like their products.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we are checking everybody locally before we go out of the area.
Correct.
Thank you.
But when you're on the state bid list, you're kind of committed to certain companies. Most of them are not local. Midstate Trucking is, because they're all spread out all through Wisconsin, too.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported to approve up to $200,000 for the purchase of the dump truck with sander and plow for the Public Works Department to be ordered in 2021 pricing for delivery in the budgeted context of 2023. Is there any further discussion? Hearing Counselor Baraboo.
Yeah, this is a very good move, Ed, because the way inflation is going now, that state bid's going to go up. There's no question about it, because you can't get parts hardly any place for
you
equipment
can't.
now.
You can't.
And the inflation is like at 7% right now, so figure it out, we're gonna save some money in the long run.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approve a resolution to apply and accept funds from the IRRB for the Community Infrastructure Grant for road improvements at Highway 53 and P&H Road.
And this is something we've been working on for the last 2 years with P&H. This is a pass-through. P&H Road is operated mostly by, used to be P&H, then Jerry Global, now Komatsu. And so working with the Department of Transportation and meeting with the District 1 engineer, they've moved this up on their list to accomplish that. And in order for them to get the money through the IRRB, it has to come through the City of Virginia as a pass-through. So we're looking for approval of a resolution to apply and accept funds for this project. Anything else you'd like to add, Matt? Nothing from Matt Reed, our SCH engineer. So looking for council action. Council Bearable.
Also move that we authorize acceptance of the funds from the IRRB for this project.
Council Johnson moves to approve the resolution to apply for and accept funds from the IRRB for the Community Infrastructure Grant for road improvements for Highway 53 and P&H Road. Is there support? Support by Councilor Beyondich and Councilor Barnzelli, obviously at the same time. So, well, officially, Councilor Beyondich, is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 4 is review resident request regarding blight issues at 410 5th Street South in Virginia.
Okay, thank you. And we have in the audience today Mr. Bruce Kinsley, who has been here on several occasions with respect to this property issue he has a question about. And again, once again, Mr. Kinsley, welcome to the committee of the whole meeting and
Have at it.
have at it. Yep,
Okay.
you betcha. Thank you. And we did
Again-
receive your emails, so we're all aware of that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm Bruce Kingsley. Emailed you regarding the property at 410 Fifth, which we are now going on a 14-year struggle with, attempting to have something made of this property or have the property demolished. It's been vacant now for over 4 years. It was a blight hazard prior to that, along with several other hazards. It's become more of a health hazard, both to my family and to the public. Some newer developments, I think I explained in my email to you, but for public record, this summer my garage became infested with mice. I think I trapped somewhere between 50 and 100 mice. And in working on my vehicle, I actually sat there and watched mice migrate over from that residence to mine. Another issue, and I know it was an issue when the building was still inhabited, is mold in the building. And my guess is that it's significantly worse. When you see significant temperature changes in that building, the inside of the windows become just absolutely coated with a thick layer of moisture. And like I say, I know there was mold in there before, so I can't envision that has gotten any better and probably significantly worse. The building has had no electricity to it, as far as I know, for 4 years. No plumbing. The plumbing all burst. It destroyed the ceilings in the building. I mean, I feel like I'm on repeat here. I've told you folks so many times about the issues with this. In July of this year, there was a notice on the front door saying that they were 4 years back on taxes on the building. 2 years ago, I know that there was some type of agreement struck with the landlord that he would have 1.5 years, which would have ended last summer, to, he was gonna, he said, convert the building into a single-family residence and sell it by last summer. Shortly after that discussion with you folks, he moved a dumpster in outside. He threw away a couple items in the yard and then proceeded to fill the dumpster with garbage from other properties. He would show up every night with a truckload in the back of his truck, filled the dumpster with material from other properties to make it seem as though he had actually done some work to this dwelling. In actuality, there's been no work done whatsoever. A couple of years ago, I looked over there. I tend to watch the property because I'm afraid that it's going to be occupied by vagrants or somebody's going to burn it. And a couple of years ago, I saw flashlights in there at night. So I went running over to see what was going on. And there were people in there, and I said, "What are you doing in here?" "Well, we're heating contractors." I said, "What are you doing in here?" "Well, Mr. Tolman asked us that we want new heat put in this building. In 2 weeks, he's going to rent it out." And I said to them, I said, "Are you going to do that?" They said, "Are you kidding me? This place is a total wreck. It needs to be torn down." I can't tell you how many people have looked at the place and said it needs to be torn down. The woman who was the last resident, who I'm still in contact with, I know her, not well, but she was going to buy it from Mr. Tolman on a contract for deed. And supposedly they did that. You can't prove to me that that actually happened because I don't see where the property ever left his name. But nonetheless, she checked into getting a loan for the property at that time, 4 years ago. And he wanted $55,000 for it. And she attempted to apply for a loan, and there wasn't a bank in town that would give her even $20,000. She was told that there is, I don't care how much money you put into that building, it's not safe, and it cannot be occupied. See, if you were to hook up the electricity right now, it's an immediate fire hazard. There's exposed wires in the house, there's exposed wires in the garage. There were wires laying out in the garage last time I looked. Yard. Sorry. The yard, if you go there right now, I mean, we must have, what, almost 2 feet of snow? The weeds are sticking up probably at least a foot to 2 feet beyond that. I think it was mowed once this year when I complained, and that's all. The entrances, the back doorway, there used to be support posts for the awning over it. Those were pulled out. The awning is now gradually bending down, and eventually somebody's going to get fallen on. There's probably a 3 to 4 foot step out the back door. There's a side door up above where if you walk out the side door, you drop 10 feet. I mean, I've sent pictures. I went through my phone the other day, and I've got pictures back to 2015, and that's only because that's all my phone will store. Every single year, at least once or twice a year, I've taken pictures of the blight and the hazards. And like I say, he made this promise to the city a year and a half ago. Nothing was done. There's no recourse for it. The building is vacant. You're supposed to be fining him for having a vacant building. As far as I know, that's never happened. It's just, it keeps going on. You keep enabling him, and there's no recourse. The city back in 2015, I actually pulled up the article from the Mesabi Tribune, July 2nd of 2015. Attorney Budarak set a deadline that if work wasn't done to that building by July 2nd, that it was going under the wrecking ball. And July 2nd came, and absolutely nothing had been done to it. No recourse, no follow-up. I came to one of these council meetings. I told you about it. I believe it was in 2016, and I have a copy of the article. And you were charging both owners, Mr. Toman and Ms. Hunsack, with failure to comply with blight ordinances. I'm looking in public record, and there's no record that that was ever enforced. I don't think they were ever charged. We all agreed in this room that they were both to be charged, and it didn't happen. So again, we've enabled this property. My wife and I are actually to the point where we started making plans to leave Virginia because we're absolutely disgusted with the lack of action on this. Problem is, we talk to realtors, they say, well, here's what your property should be worth, but then you got this thing next door, so you're probably going to get about 50% less. So now I'm taking a personal hit because of that. Not to mention the punitive damages that my family's incurred living next to that monstrosity. I mean, I feel like I could just go on, and it almost seems pointless, but it's got to be done. I'm not letting it go this time. If I have to take it to a higher authority, I'm going to take it to a higher authority. If I have to take legal action, I'm going to take legal action. But it seems like it should be so easy. I've given you folks so many chances, more than most people. I mean, I think my fuse is way longer than most people. Please get something done. Get this place torn down. I know you can't fix it up. I mean, you can look at it and see, but I know you can't do it. If it's a concern about upkeep on the property after it, I've told you. I talked to Mr. Buderak. We had an agreement on that July 2nd deal. And I said, I'll buy the property for a minimal amount and I will upkeep it. I'll put a park out there for kids. I'll mow the grass, I'll put a basketball hoop out, I'll put flowers around it. I just don't want what's there next to me right now. So the ball's in your court, but like I say, it's not going to get dropped at this point. You all know the condition of the building. Do something, please, now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kingsley. If you could just have a seat for a moment, I'd like to bring up we have our code enforcement officials here for our new department. It's planning, permitting, and code enforcement. And some of the questions you asked about, whether they were fined or there's no record of that. I think our code department would have some history about that, could disseminate that to you, your family, the general public, and to us as well. So I would ask for Bill Cole or Christina Nicola or Stephanie to come forward and kind of give us a rundown on that property and what you've done and what can be done and what the recommendation is and how, if anything, we can do to help alleviate the concerns that Mr. Kingsley has. Bill Cole, our code official. Bill.
Good morning, Council, Mayor. The property in question has been billed for the vacant building registration. The property owner has not paid it, but we have certified those bills onto the taxes. As far as the work that is to be performed on it, the owner got started, COVID came, and things got a little tight. As far as getting contractors to work on it, he had one lined up. They were fairly busy at the time, but then when COVID came, things slowed down and no work has been done on the structure itself. As far as I'm aware, he still intends to rehab the structure. Physically, the foundation is fine, the roof is still intact. Structurally, I cannot condemn it for demolition. Habitation, of course, yep, that's pretty simple. It has no utilities to it, so it cannot be lived in. So at this time, until he gets a contractor to start on it, or the county gets it for back taxes, the owner does not pay the taxes on it, someone else does. That's kind of where we're at with it. As far as the long grass and the yard, whenever the blight officer sees that it's not being cut, she does get a hold of him, sends him a letter, hey, you need to mow the grass. I'm not too familiar with that end of it. I generally just deal with the buildings themselves, and blight officer takes care of garbage in the yard, long grass. One of my other officers can come up and go over the blight issues. That. Any questions?
Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, Bill, have you
And
been
then Counselor
inside
Johnson.
that building since the original look at it in the blight stuff that you had originally way back? Have you been down in that building again?
I
Because
haven't.
Mr. Kingsley is right, if there's garbage up to, you know what, in the basement and stuff, I think that's a health hazard. And I think we should go after it and just go to court and take it down. I don't care if it's met the tax forfeiture or not. You know, that's, and I'm going to ask our attorney, can we do that with everything I hear going on with that building?
I believe there's some additional information that you might want to glean before you can make a informed decision, but could you give Councilor River a little bit of an answer until we're through here?
Thank you, Mayor. Counselor, there are some things that we may be able to do. The issue becomes, and I think Mr. Cole touched on it, whether the structure has reached that level where it's become an imminent safety hazard as far as structurally. And while I understand there's a lot of concerns, the mayor's right. There's some additional information that I may need to speak with Mr. Cole about to try and gather to get together alternatives that may be available. As far as just going to court and taking the structure down, unless it meets a very specific standard, we've got to be careful about that because we'll end up in an eminent domain case where the city will be required to pay reasonable or fair market value for the property if we take it down and it hasn't reached that level. That being said, it sounds like there are a number of issues that could open some additional options that would allow the city to take some action after appropriate notices and then bill services back to the property, which ultimately will be added to the taxes and probably ensure that a tax default occurs if they haven't been paid in 4 years at this point. But there's some additional information I'll have to gather from Mr. Cole, but there are some options that will be available to the city.
So has anybody, Bill, looked at how many years are left on that tax forfeiture stuff? Because it's, what is it now, 5 years?
Somewhere between 3 and 4 is what I'm seeing on the county's website, if
Okay,
that's
but
up
the,
to
but the
date.
total is 5 now, right? Used to be 7, but it's 5 now, from my understanding. Is that correct? It's 4? And then they get an additional year to do something after that, is that correct? That's correct, okay. That's what Britt said. So he's already, I hate to see Mr. Kingsley have to live with a mess like that. Can we go in to that facility with some type of an order to look to see how much blight and stuff is in there and what's inside of that building now, what it looks like? How can we do that? Can we get a court order to do that?
Actually, I have a fairly good rapport with the owner. If there are issues, he will let myself and the fire marshal in. The last time I was in with the fire marshal, yes, the building was totally vacant. There had been some plumbing leaks and some of the ceiling had came down. The paint was peeling, of course. But at the time, the owner had stated, in the near future, I want to put together a plan to rehab the structure and either rent it or sell it.
Have you seen that plan?
like
Have
I
you
say-
seen that plan yet?
No, he hasn't sent the plan in yet.
How long ago?
Started the demolition work on it. I told him, you really don't need a permit to do any of the interior demolition as long as you're not doing something structural in the building. At that point, it does require a permit because we have to check it for structural integrity.
Okay.
Like I say, COVID came and this is where we are.
I don't care about COVID because we had contractors that were doing work all over the place, and I know a number of them that did. So that's an excuse that isn't viable in my book.
Everything cost more and it was slower with COVID.
Well,
Waiting
that's
for-
his problem. That's his problem,
waiting for
not
material.
ours. Now for transparency, I'm going to give you transparency. Mr. Tolman is my wife's nephew. Okay, so I'm going to be transparent, but I want that place to go. I don't care if he is related to my wife.
Until it's structurally deficient, which is my easiest route, at that point, I can condemn it as a public safety hazard.
I've actually been in the attic of that building.
I have not been in the attic myself. The fire marshal was not in the attic. time to get ladders and try to gain access to the attic of the structure. We just walked through the house and the garage apartment. At that time, we didn't find anything that we could cite as an imminent hazard.
Okay. One of the things, if it goes tax forfeit, is we have an agreement with the county. We did a number, I don't know how many years ago, now that before they try to sell a tax forfeited piece of property in City of Virginia, we have to approve them selling that.
And we still review their list
Okay.
to see if we've got any violations that are open. And at that point, if there are none, we will go and take a look at them. If we deem it necessary, we will go into homes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to reserve any additional comments, and I'm sure there's going to be some action to be taken by the council to bring people together and get this once and for all. Whether I'll reserve comments and what my thoughts are later on until all the councilors are done. First, we'll go to Councilor Johnson, then to Councilor Beyondich, and then to Councilor Paulson. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. So we've billed them, but the registration has not been paid, correct?
It was
So
certified on its-
how many years can they not pay their vacant lot registration before we can do something?
What happens if they don't pay the registration? It gets charged as a special assessment, so they pay it.
Okay, I do have it, I did pull it up on the St. Louis County property, and 2021 would be year 5 of not paying taxes according to this. It says taxes payable in 2022 have not been finalized and are currently not available, but there hasn't been taxes paid. Mr. Kingsley is correct. Tolman owns the property and Hunsack is the taxpayer, but obviously is not paying taxes. I lived in that house. I lived in the apartment when the ceiling collapsed because the plumbing was so bad. If you go in there, I'm guessing there's still a sheet of wainscoting screwed up in the bedroom to hide the crap that's literally crap that's above it. When I lived there, there was 3 inches of standing water in the basement all the time. And that was, I've lived in my house now for 11 years. With all due respect, I don't think anybody wants to find anything wrong with this house. I think that I moved out because it was unsafe for me and my family to live in.
And that's probably why it's vacant right now.
Well, and I don't understand why this council has zero authority to do anything about it, to get it fixed. And Mr. Kingsley's a vocal neighbor. How many other houses like this are around town who are next to other rentals where people don't say anything because they're afraid if they say something, their landlord is going to kick them out, because that happens in this town. That's why we're working so hard on a rental code, because this has got to stop. Mr. Tolman and his contract for deed person have always done just barely enough. If a property is mowed once a summer when it gets a letter, that's a red flag. If he can't put any effort into mowing the lawn once a month, where is the inside? The letter that we got dated 11/13/19, and you were referring to this. I have put a timeline together with what will be realistic sequence of events. You said you did not receive that. You did not receive a timeline from him in writing, correct?
I've got that letter.
But we don't have a timeline. We don't have the plan.
Intended to be done, I think, in 19.
Yes, but we don't have a written plan from him, correct?
No.
Okay. Rent ready in 2021, and I have to agree with Councilor Baraboo. The excuse of COVID right now is there could have been something that, if he really cared, it would be shoveled every day. The sidewalk in front is supposed to be shoveled after a snowstorm. Every person in this town has to shovel the front of their home after it snows, whether it's 6 feet of snow or 6 inches of snow, and we all do the best we can, and the city does the best, but I'll bet you he has never once shoveled anything in front of his house in the last 4 years.
I wouldn't think so.
So all of these things, so as we work on our rental code, this is one of those things that we really need to figure out and tighten up, to provide you all with the tools to keep this from happening in our town. That's a nice block. The people on the east end and the west end work very hard. There's an apartment rental on the west end or on the east end that's pretty good compared to what I lived in. And I know that garage apartment, that there was pipes that burst in there right after I left. And I think the utility had to go in there and shut the water off because it was leaking so bad. Now, I can't believe that magically all that water just disappeared and that the back is structurally sound. And I know that I'm not questioning you. I'm just really frustrated that, again, we're sitting here having this discussion, and again, we do this thing where, okay, so he sold a contract for deed, but she didn't pay for it. But now we're going to start the process all over again. I don't understand that. I don't understand, because he's still the property owner. He's never not owned the property. So why is it not that everything stays in line? I don't understand why, if he finds somebody else that he's going to sell it for contract for deed, does that mean we have another 10 years where nothing happens because he's got a contract? But he's still the property owner. So I have to agree with Councilor Bear, but we need to figure out what to do to make this stop. Because, the stuff in here, it's like a bad novel because it's repetitive. It's the same letters, it's the same, mow your lawn. Okay, I mowed my lawn. And what he does, I wouldn't consider mowing a lawn. He's weed whacking so that it's under the 6 inches. It's not maintained. You can drive by after he does it. It looks like a field that's been hayed. And that hay just provides cover for mice and other rodents. So, and I've seen that. We need to do something that makes this stop. We have to be done with this.
Well, from here, I can work with Mr. Lindsay, give him my file on it, see what he feels we can do next.
And I appreciate that.
That's ultimately where anything in the property maintenance code does wind up. Structurally deficient, that's a pretty simple one. Condemned for habitation, that's kind of a tough one to get into court, but we can give it a go.
Well, and I would say that barring a letter with a very concise timeline and actual contractors already paid for or contracted, signed contracts, he's not going to do anything with this. And I think we all know that, and we need, as a council, need to figure out how to stop this from happening in the future. I totally appreciate Mr. Kingsley's frustration. They have a beautiful house, a beautiful yard, and that the people in that neighborhood have to look at that eyesore all the time. It's sad. And I appreciate the work you and the rest of the folks do. I know you're tied by what we dictate here, and we need to change that dictation. We need to work on that rental code, which we are doing, but we definitely need to put some teeth behind it so that we can solve these problems. Landlords provide a service. Unfortunately, many of them who are absentee, Mr. Toman is around, but I wouldn't say he's an active participant, especially in this property. We need to fix that so that people can live safely and not have to worry about the ceiling collapsing on them while they're sleeping at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Now, I know that we're going to be talking about that. We have Councilor Beyondich, Councilor Paulson, and Councilor Freely, and we're going to be talking about the history. We're going to be talking about what hasn't been done and what we need to do, and the frustration we all have. And we're going to vent that out today because we're just as frustrated as Mr. Kingsley is, but we're not as adversely affected like Mr. Kingsley and his family is with respect to this. So when this gets all done, you know, I'm going to be asking for some council action to make a motion to put together a group of people. In fact, I'll say it right now, and then maybe later on we can have that motion coming forward, that our code official, along with our city attorney, and keeping Mr. Kingsley, who's an affected person, and he's not the only neighbor that's affected by this. You got 2 other neighbors that have expressed significant concern and frustration with this property also. Mr. Kingsley isn't the only one. He's the spokesperson for these neighbors that I've talked to on a number of occasions as well. So we got to put together some kind of a plan to make sure we get this done once and for all. I mean, how many times do we have to promise that this is going to be done or that's going to be done? You know, we can't let the owner of the property be the driver of the compliance here. We have to be the driver and force him to comply or take more adverse steps to ensure that he does. And not a year from now, not 6 months from now, but soon. So that being said, we'll move over to Councilor Beyondich and then over to Councilor Paulson and then to Councilor Freely. Councilor Beyondich.
Could you tell me who our blight officer is?
Trish,
Trish? And
don't ask me her last name.
I feel your frustration on that. So this has been a problem for 14 years. When there's blight, if it's picked up one time and then we forget about it, similar to the problems that Mr. Kingsley is coming to us with, because I've been here and he has presented to us twice since I've been on the council. And I always assumed things were taken care of and they fall between the cracks. I would like this to be on every agenda so it is fresh in our mind and we keep at it. We keep asking the questions and we keep moving forward on it. We seem to think everything is okay, and over time, it gets brushed under the rug and we never revisit it. So I would like this to be put on the agenda for us to follow up on the progress on what is happening. And it seems like the entire structure from top to bottom, every corner, has that ever been totally inspected?
Fire Marshal and I went through both structures,
Top to bottom?
bottom. Didn't
You
go
had
into
never
the
been in the
attics.
attic, though?
No. The procedure for turning electricity on after it's been disconnected, an electrician must go into the structure, check the electrical in the building and certify that it's okay. Otherwise, public utilities will not make that connection.
Please continue, Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. So earlier in the conversation, did you go up in the attic to look at the attic?
No.
Okay, so that part was never gone through. And I would agree with Mr. Baraboo that COVID coming along happens to be a very good reason to not work on something. However, I know several homeowners who have had their homes updated and revamped all during COVID. So COVID is a very handy excuse for any type of work that needs to be done in that structure. So I am just curious for the follow-up on this, that we put it on the agenda for each meeting, and we can follow up and see exactly what we can do about this. But I would agree, I think we do need to do something. We've promised Mr. Kingsley and his family that we would take care of this and look into it, and it continues to rear its ugly head. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're all, I think, in agreement that we have to take some action steps, immediate action steps, with a team of people to get this accomplished. I have some more comments to make, but I'll reserve them till after this is over with. Councillor Paulson, and then over to Councillor Freely.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. I want to clarify, I heard, I was late coming in, but I heard that someone else pays the taxes. Who pays those taxes?
Last known.
Okay, so we've created a vacant building registration which requires the names, addresses, and telephone numbers and email addresses, if applicable, of all known lien holders and other parties with any legal interest in the building. Has that not been done on our vacant building registration?
Has been billed for it?
Not the billing, but the actual requirements that we've stated in that registration, that we require anyone that, so if someone else is paying the taxes, that would be required. The city requires, if I'm not correct, the city requires that under our property maintenance code, that information. So what Mr. Kingsley is stating is that Mr. Tolman sold the property contract for deed to some person, and do we have a copy of that contract for deed within our vacant building registration? Would you have that information, Pam? And are they required, I don't know if Britt can answer this, they're not required to,
Well, he's still actually the fee holder, the deed holder on the property. So whether he sold it contract for deed, he didn't record it. So it's a handshake contract for deed, I'm assuming.
so it's not recorded, and that would be not enforceable to collect taxes from a handshake agreement to the contract for deed person that the property was intended to be sold to.
Correct.
So it would revert back
Back to
to
Tolman.
Mr. Tolman. Okay.
A quick clarification, if I may. I did talk to a sidebar with our city attorney. Regardless if it's a contract for deed, whether it's recorded or not, the owner still holds the deed to the property, is the original owner, which would be Mr. Tolman.
Okay, but there seemed to be some conversation that that was an issue, so I just wanted to clarify the tax issue. And then when I had inquired about some other properties actually on Chestnut Street, the action step that the county takes is between year 3 and 4. Actually, they start the process could be started in year 3, but it started in year 4. So what is the length of time that the county has to recoup? Do they give them a leniency period of maybe a year to, after they put, I think the notification, Mr. Kingsley, if I'm not incorrect, there was a notification that the property was going into tax forfeiture, is that correct?
Yeah, and I actually have a copy of the door, and I believe
Okay, so I would like,
And if I may just add a little bit more to that for your next, I believe it's 180 days from the time he gets
180.
notice, that if he doesn't do it, I mean, they can say you take action, but they can bring the property taxes up. I think they only have to pay a month, and then it goes back again, right? So they can pay partial, and that continues to move forward. So, but we'll get a clarification, maybe from Brian or others, to make sure that that is accurate. So,
okay, and then
please continue.
According to the document that Mr. Kingsley just presented, the name is actually the name of the contract for deed person. I don't know if you have this documentation. But that's concerning to me if the county has the wrong name. If that's a handshake agreement and that the county has the property and the legal description of the property underneath the person that has the contract for deeds. So we need to find out who actually is responsible, and is it recorded, is it not recorded? I think those are legal documents that the city needs to obtain. That would just be my, Mr. Kingsley, can Mr. Lindsay keep that? Okay. And I had a long conversation with Mr. Kingsley. So in terms of the correspondence that's in our packet, I want to make sure, now it is public information, but I want to make sure Mr. Kingsley receives a copy of that. If we could email a copy of that to him. If you don't have a packet and you don't, I would like you to have a record of what has transpired. And then if there's anything additional that you want to bring forward that isn't in that correspondence, I would encourage you to do that. Then the other question that I had, and it's on the Exhibit A, page 37, it states under item 6, and this was back in June 2021, it was requested, I believe, by Bill Cole. I don't know if you put that Exhibit A in there, but it was requested that the status of the water, sewer, natural gas, and electric utilities would be given to the city. Do we have that status?
And none of the utilities are operational.
Okay, and from what date have they not been operational? And then from that date, does that give us any teeth in our ordinance, in our property maintenance code? Does that give us any teeth in terms of the condemnation process, or safety, or health hazard, or any or all of the above?
Anytime you do not provide sanitation, heat, and lighting, a property is not habitable.
And then how does that play into the condemnation? It's been a long time since I read that, and
It would be condemned for habitation.
for being non-habitated, is that the word?
Nobody can live in it.
Uninhabited?
You can't rent it, people can't live in it.
And how long, Bill, must that be the case in order to start a condemnation proceeding? Is it 1 year, 5 years?
The minute you do not provide those services, it's not habitable
So according to
and vacant.
the documents, it has been uninhabited for 4 years. So does the city have any legal authority to proceed with a condemnation process due to the fact that none of those items on page 37, item number 6, are connected?
Brian, could you provide us any info?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the reason that I was looking for a little bit more information. The city, most likely, could move forward with an action. The question becomes how effective or what would our probability of success be? And the reason that this area becomes so complicated or it's so difficult to move is because the courts traditionally and historically have been very careful about invading the rights of private property owners, and you have to make sure that you've got all of your ducks in a row, or we'll be throwing good money after bad. And that's why I'm going to request some additional information from Mr. Cole to see exactly what exists here, and go out to look to the case law to make sure that if we do move forward, and when we do move forward, we have all of our ducks in a row so that we're not wasting the city's resources pursuing an action that may not be successful.
I appreciate that. I mean, that makes sense. We need to have the documentation that is required. However, we did send this formal letter out on June 3rd of 2021 of all of those requirements, and to receive an answer back, I would assume that's why the letter was sent, for the city to receive an answer back. And I don't see that the city has received an answer back, almost like Councilor Johnson was saying, was there a plan? And I don't see that there was any correspondence. So at that point, if there's no correspondence that, hey, this is the status of this is the plan for this, does that present a less than good faith posturing that nothing is going to be done in the future?
If I may.
Brian?
Sorry with the tough question.
No, and the questions, I mean, from a procedural standpoint, the questions aren't all that difficult. It's just from a practical standpoint, making sure that we do everything we need to do. So there is a procedure that we could use, and part of the issue that we've run into is the approach, and maybe a slight change in the approach may be appropriate. And there's, aside from the full condemnation action, we could look at a hazardous building proceeding. And in that case, the city council could actually issue a correction order, which is different than simply sending correspondence to the owner of the property, asking them for a plan. It sets in motion a process that requires his plan to be submitted within a certain period of time, and then attaches a very specific sanction or a very specific result for failure to comply with that timeline. And so in this case, there's a more informal process happening here, and we could at any point, I think with additional information, we're gonna wanna go back through to collect all of the information, because one of the things that the corrective order has to address, we have to very specifically as a city tell the property owner what exactly we're looking for correction of, and then say you have a set period of time in which to get us a plan, or the city can move forward, take whatever actions it deems necessary to abate this potential health hazard, and we can charge all the costs to do that back to the city by way of ultimately, if the bill's not paid, putting it onto the tax rolls.
And I guess what I would say is that we've been down that road for recourse quite a few number of times as you approached this councils in the past. Is that correct? And it seems like there's minimal just to get to that point has happened, or maybe hasn't even happened. And so I think it's great that we're gonna explore all the legal avenues that we can, but I do think that we need to get you some, I don't want to use the word justice, it's not the right word, but some resolution or remedy, correct? So, and that being said, in that document that you have with who the taxes are under, that's very confusing to me. So I think we need to straighten that out. And then the last question that I have, I'm sorry to be so long, is what can the health department do if the health department were called in? According to Mr. Kingsley's letter, there might be an additional step with the health department. So what would that look like, and have we ever gone down that avenue with the health department?
Bill, could you answer that question for her?
If there's an infestation of rodents, vermin, things of that nature, that one's fairly simple. Mold the word does not appear anywhere in any of our rules and regulations. The health department is very careful about when they use that word. Specialists have to come in and test these things. Mold is everywhere. So an infestation, that one is a simple one.
And then from then, if it was a health department issue, the health department would take an authority position for remediation or remedy, or does the health department have a condemnation process? I'm just trying to understand what the
I don't
options.
believe they do. They turn that back to the local jurisdiction. My only recourse is to request entry into the property, or spend time sitting somewhere near the property to see if I can find some type of infestation going on.
Okay.
Had a neighbor that had the same thing.
And I can attest to that from it's last summer. So please continue, Councilor
I'm
Paulson.
finished with my questions. I
Okay.
appreciate I appreciate the work that we are going to be doing, but I do think we need a complete resolution to this issue. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thank you. And I know Counselor Friedlieb has been waiting very patiently, but could you give us just a quick answer here, if you can give us one? Otherwise, just say, no, I can't, and we'll move on. So I'm looking for a comparison difference between what we did with the apartment complex that's been abandoned that was on 3rd Avenue and 8th Street South. Now, we took court action to condemn that property, even though the property was owned by an individual who hasn't rented it for a long time. And the same scenario is with this private residence here next to Mr. Kingsley's house of 415 5th Street. So the difference between when we went to get a court order and we were approved for that court order to tear that building down, what is the difference that prompted the authorization for us to go to court to take that building down, as opposed to what we would need to do to tear down the property at 415? What was the designator? What was the trigger mechanism that gave us that authority to do it?
In that case, we did have structural deficiencies, foundation, and with the exterior of the building. The exterior of the building was basically right up to the public right-of-way, and the structures, the canopies on the front of the building were ready to come off and could have easily injured somebody on the sidewalk.
A similar condition is with this one. This property just said it's not close to if it fell down unless somebody was on the property. So,
Somebody would have to be trespassing to get hurt.
but I was just,
You got kids playing in the backyard.
and I was just looking at the distinction between the two. So we have done this in the past, and the mechanism we could use based upon a full force inspection of that property moving forward. So I'm sure there's going to be a motion to direct immediate action in some regard, whether it's a comprehensive study, whatever. But I'll reserve that for council action. I'll move to Councilor Friedlieb. Councilor Friedlieb, thank you.
I just want to acknowledge Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley's letter because it was palpable and it made my heart start to pound. And so there is certainly justifiable reason for us to be sitting here discussing this. It sounds like we might be entering the 15th year of beating this horse to death, Bruce, and I don't know that we're going to be able to send it to the glue factory yet this year or not, but I think it's important for us to review what is done. You have a file on this and what can be done. The thing that's most important to me, though, is that we keep our focus and our attention as an elected body and as a community, not on each other, but on the ultimate responsible party being the landowner. That's who we need to be frustrated with, not with one another, not with our employees, with the city, but with that landowner that doesn't do his job. That's the job that's not being done, and that frustrates me as well. I would like to see you reopen that file and enact some kind of a strategic plan of remediation of some sort with objectives and dates that are specific and specified to Mr. Tolman that need to be attended. How much teeth we can put into that with our authority within the city, I don't know. That's what Brian will have to tell us, whether or not we have that kind of authority and intensity to do that, but that's what obviously needs to be done. So I would be moving in the direction of making a motion to direct city staff, Bill, Christina, and Jake, to reopen that file along with Mr. Lindsay and to enact a plan of remediation with specific goals and timelines for Mr. Tolman to address that property, either to remediate that property or to get it out of the city, for that matter. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, and I don't know that that's going to initiate anything, but I think that's where we have to reopen that file and get our attention back on that landowner with the expectations of the community on that landowner, not on each other. So thank you.
Right now, we have the letter of intent on what he intended.
I think that is the motion that you're making right now. Would you make that motion based upon that?
I would like to make a motion to direct city staff to enact a strategic plan of remediation with dates and objectives for for the landowner to comply with.
And I think it would be important, if I may, before there's a second, we want to make sure that we keep Mr. Kingsley and the neighborhood that are as adversely affected by this property in the loop as the action steps we are take moving forward. So they know what's going on. They don't just come here and then all of a sudden wonder what's happening. we should make sure they're in the loop as whatever we possibly can, based upon the information, disseminate that in a timely manner based upon your motion, and make sure it gets done as quickly as possible. And like you said, not when the glue factory is going to take the horse. So is there support for that motion? Support by Councillor Johnson for that motion. Is there any further discussion? Before we do that, is that kind of direction we're going to be looking at, Mr. Kingsley? And I think that's part of the motion by Councillor Freely to make sure that you give some finite dates and times in which you get this accomplished sooner than later. So there's more motion on the floor and support. Further discussion. First it was Councillor Bearable, and then over to Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bearable.
Brian, I have some information I'll give you after the meeting. My stepson is the St. Louis County Tax Manager to make sure all that stuff is correct. I'll give you his phone numbers and stuff, so you can follow up and make sure that it's not just a thing slapped on a door, but they've got an actual contact for this person that supposedly should be paying the taxes. All right, I'll give you that after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Whose responsibility is it to demonstrate that a property is habitable?
The owners.
The owners. So at this point, we're fairly certain that it doesn't have any services to it. And if it's not habitable, then you can start different processes. So I guess I would ask that would be one of the first steps, is that we give him 14 days to demonstrate, or whatever the date is. But if it's habitable, then fine. But that should be the first step. Prove to us that it can be, you can turn on the electricity, the lights, and the power, and someone can live in it right now. Because if that's not it, the amount of money, I can't imagine what it would cost to fix any one of those systems, let alone all 5 health and safety systems. So I just wanted to make sure that that's something that we're not going to be spending money on to prove that it's not habitable, that it is his, in fact, the property owner's responsibility to demonstrate its habitability that can be lived in. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Johnson. That is in the verbiage of the motion by Councillor Freely to accomplish all those goals and objectives. And so it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Barnzelli.
6 years ago, Don Cipla and I were in this same room. We were talking to him and his wife. After that meeting, we walked over there to 5th Street South, and nothing was ever done. It's the same as it was then. So I hope we can move with this. You know, he was threatening to leave, and because we talked about knocking that down. It's still there today. So I hope we can get that, hope we can get this taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. And part of that motion is to make sure we take the action steps that gets to where we need to be. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. In addition to that, it'll be an action item that'll continue to be on the discussion items under that section for the city council meeting for us to continue to review and make sure Mr. Kingsley and his family and the surrounding neighbors are also in the loop as well. So thank you very much for everything. So anything else before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Does that need to be a motion to put that continuation on our agenda or not? Okay, thank you.
It is in the notes, but thank you. Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kingsley, once again.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I gotta go see if my furnace is being installed now.
Okay.
But I thank you for the time, and I appreciate everybody's input. Look forward to resolving this.
And I had no problem getting a contractor either. So, all right, thank you. Britt?
Mayor, I had sent an email yesterday that I mentioned that we wanted to add an item to the agenda for today.
Oh, yeah, with Matt Reed. Thank you,
Yep, so
Matt.
we can get Matt going on his way, so we don't have to keep him here for the other items that really don't pertain to him.
Yeah,
The
please do.
next item I wanted to add on the agenda is Matt got an email request asking if we were interested in applying for MnDOT state funding for, interestingly enough, for the MnDOT intersection at Cuyuna Drive. So Matt's passing out the discussion that we had with MnDOT back, that was quite a few years ago, the paperwork from that time frame for us to talk about it again, if we wanted to apply for funding for that intersection.
And thank you, Britt, for that. And what Matt pointed out as we review this document, just a little history.
Warm-hearted, though.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So there's some notes in a meeting that we had, the MnDOT takes all these notes and they shorten those notes. So not all that information is actually in the notes that we talked about. We made sure that we didn't want Cuyuna Drive closed when this new highway came. There was a lot of pressure from the Department of Transportation to say, we're gonna do that section of the highway and fix that up unless you acquiesce to this. And so we want to make sure that there was a way in which we could move Cuyuna Drive open. So part of that notes that are in there doesn't accurately reflect the discussion of that meeting because they in turn, as a compromise, they put that J-turn in on Vermillion Drive. And they thought that was going to alleviate the issue, which it has not. So after significant discussion over time, and after meeting before, and we've had discussions after that through our lobbyist and the Department of Transportation back then, and through our I know that Senator Thomas Sunny was involved, Senator Bach was involved, and others. Now we're at the point where, in the beginning, the Department of Transportation says, no, we don't have any other remedy for you. This Vermillion Drive is the only remedy for you. But now, they were saying in more recent meetings that, no, we would have given you that authority to put an intersection in there. You should have just made that request back then, which we did do. But the state said, we're not paying for it. It was going to be, I don't know how many millions of dollars, and then there wasn't a place to put it. Now, all of a sudden, after reviewing, and thanks to some of the councilors, and to Britt, thank you, and to Matt Reed, and to our lobbyists and others, moving forward, now we've got the attention of the Department of Transportation, and here are we back today, you're going to give us, maybe enter into discussion about that, and applying for this grant funding for that. So just a little backside on some of the meeting notes that don't actually accurately reflect what our discussion was. It's pretty much paraphrased in a very short synopsis that kind of benefits the state and to alleviate, that we actually acquiesce without concern, but that's not the case here. So thank you. Britt, anything more? Matt?
Hi, good morning. Mayor Coffey, you pretty well handled the history of all of this.
Apologize, go ahead.
So I don't need to touch on any more of that, I don't think, but Britt is right. I got an email here a couple of weeks ago from the District State Aid Engineer, Kristen Foster, asking if the city had a project that they would like to apply for the local partnership program that they have through MnDOT. And what that program basically is a mechanism for getting work done within the trunk highway right-of-way that benefits both the highway itself and also the local community. And it pays for, following the MnDOT's cost participation policy, it pays for any of the construction that fits under their policy that occurs within the trunk highway right-of-way. And it also covers some ancillary costs, like a certain percentage of it related to construction, engineering, things like that. So it's a way that, it's a fund that's there to try and help communities get some work done within these trunk highway right-of-ways that MnDOT just doesn't have the time or the staff, or it's not very high on their priority list. They've got other bigger fish to fry, if you will. And so this is an opportunity to allow the local agencies to proceed with some of these projects, similar to like what's going to go on up by P&H. It's a different funding source, but kind of the same type of a thing. So, as Britt mentioned, the Bridgeview development area up there at that intersection at Cuyuna Drive is the one that came to the forefront, and we need to, if it's something that the city is interested in, we need to submit a letter of interest here by, I think it's January 28th, I think is what the email said. And then we'll go from there. It does not cover design costs. It does not cover any right-of-way, which right-of-way shouldn't really come into play here. But some of those upfront costs, the city would be on the hook for paying those. Once it gets to construction, then the funds would kick in. There isn't really a limit, a minimum or a maximum. There's not really a match. It's just whatever would normally fall under MnDOT's cost participation policy. And for a couple of turn lanes within the trunk highway right-of-way, I would say most or all of the construction at least would be eligible. So,
Thank you, Matt. I just have one quick question as people are reviewing, maybe it's a statement as well. I don't like the three-quarter intersection consideration, right? You like right in, right out, left in, left out. We want that. That's what we always wanted. That's what we had when we had Cayuna Drive over, and I can see they still don't want to consider that in their project development for that. So I guess we have to take, what we can get. At least it's better than nothing, but it still doesn't meet what I really need is for that development. It may help attract businesses and development there, but I just don't understand, and I know it's about safety, and I know the engineer that we met with last week on the other project, I asked him about the MnDOT guy, he says, when I went to engineering school, it was like, we want to make sure that we don't construct something that results in blood on the pavement. It's okay if we have glass on the pavement, but we don't want blood on the pavement. So, but the issue for me is that, over 30 years, there have been 3 fatalities at that intersection on Cayuna Drive. None of them were intersection related. One was alcohol related, 2 were weather related. So, but they closed it down anyway when there were more accidents at Morgan Road and Highway 53, not fatalities, but more accidents, but they left that there because of this meeting that we have here where it requires a 1,470 feet sight distance. So if we have that 470 feet sight distance, why are we just considering a three-quarter intersection? Why wouldn't they do the whole thing? Because their new plan is to do the roundabout at Progress Park and Highway 53, do some intersection at Morgan Road and Highway 53, and down at Hattrick Avenue and Highway 53, which the state came and gave us that presentation. I also met with the county engineers with respect to that. They have a different philosophy of how that does, and they were going to come to the council at some future time to present that. But so why would, if they're allowing right in, right out, north and south on those 3 intersections, why in the new intersection, why we couldn't get a full entrance and exit? I don't understand that. So I'm sure you can't answer that either. I know that's what their proposal is to do that, but I think we're here today to discuss if we want to apply for the funds associated with it. Is that correct?
yeah, and I think to confirm what Mayor Coffey is saying, I believe what they would be looking at is a right turn lane off of the northbound traffic lanes going onto Cayuna Drive and a left turn lane off of the southbound. So it would not be a full standard intersection. It would be a left in only coming from southbound, and it would be right in, right out on the northbound. So it'd be a three-quarter intersection.
So when you're coming from the north, going south, I see that like gas station, or there's a restaurant there. I want to go in there. So they go in and they do their business and they buy their items. And then how do you get out? You go back southbound. You got to go all the way down Midway Drive, all the way to the Morgan Road where there's uncontrolled intersection right now, but to be changed in 2024. And then you got to go from there, or you got to turn right and go all the way to Highway 135, go up the ramp, make the U-turn and come back. Does that make sense? It does not make sense to me. So anyway, anything else, Matt?
No, not unless anybody has any questions.
So you're asking us what, I know I was venting there. So you're asking us to what action you're asking us to take today is to have a motion to apply for?
Yeah, if the council's interested and wants to pursue it, I can work with Britt and we can get something together as far as a letter of interest goes. And it looks like we need a preliminary engineer's estimate on it too, and we can get that prepared if we need to, or maybe it's been done already. But just want to know if you guys have interest and want to get a letter of interest into MnDOT, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, thank you.
I would move that we go ahead and seek to apply for the funding, and then, well, that's what my motion would be, but for further discussion, we'd need to know what other costs would be incurred with preliminary planning and all the other things you mentioned that this funding wouldn't cover, so that we would be able to plan accordingly for the budget.
So the motion is to authorize us to apply for the funding with respect to this intersection. Is there support for that?
I'll support Mayor for more
Support.
discussion.
Yeah, support by Councilor Bearable for further discussion. Councilor Bearable.
I agree with the mayor on this. It's no different than what the ins and outs are to Midway right now. You got that turn on Vermillion, and that's a left in, no left out to go south. You're just moving the intersection. I'm assuming they'll dump the J-turn, or whatever it's called, at Vermillion and change it to Cuyuna. So there's no difference, because then you still got to go all the way down right now, and Cuyuna would have a right out to go north. There's still no difference. Am I correct?
Right, but the proposal would not be to put this at Cuyuna Drive. They'd move it someplace else, right?
Further north?
No, I think the intention here would be that the left in and the right in, right out would be at Cuyuna Drive.
Perfect, okay, thank you for that.
That's my understanding.
Yes, thank you and thank you for that clarification. Yes, please continue, Councilor Bearable. Okay, thank you. So it has been moved and supported to authorize staff and our engineer of record to work together to apply for funds for, what would be the proper term?
The LPP funding.
The LPP
Local Partnership Program.
Local partnership, okay, so that's been moved and supported. Do you have that? Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? First, Councilor Paulson, and then over to Councilor Freely. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually just have one other, I would say maybe angle to look at this from. With our new public safety facility being on 2nd between 8th and 10th, has MnDOT considered or have any of our public safety officials given any input with regarding access to Midway for emergency services, whether it's a 3/4 or a full, full access? Was any of that taken into consideration now that we've got our public safety location and we're moving forward with the building? Was any of that part of the conversation with emergency services reaching Midway? And I would assume, though, they're going to be coming back northbound hospital-wise unless they have to go southbound to Duluth or something like that. But was that at all part of the conversation that anyone had? And would that be something that should be considered in any kind of conversation going forward?
I can answer that for you, Councilor. There was lots of conversation about that. It was very specific about the ALS's ability to get into Midway, whether it was with a new facility or not, with our anticipation of putting a new facility in there. MnDOT says it doesn't make any difference. Whether it's traffic, it's traffic. So we've made an adjustment. I think during that discussion, there was a presentation made as how much more time it takes for our ALS service to get from Virginia to Midway and access to those facilities. And that's one of the reasons why they put the J-turn in there, so that they don't have to come all the way up Highway 135 and take the back way border road to get to an emergency call, or they'll have to take that J-turn to go down Vermillion Drive, or all the way down to the Borgen Road. So there was some significant discussion about that.
So it already was discussed, and there really wasn't much given to that,
At that time, there was not.
consideration given to that.
But that could be another angle to move when we have further discussion about whether this is going to be, as MnDOT is proposing or not.
Yeah, I guess I would like to see how long ago did that conversation take place?
That was during the conversation about when they were building the facility or building the new highway, and they were discussing what that intersection was going to look like at Highway 53 and 135. And when the state decided they were going to put a traffic light or a stoplight or some kind of, not a traffic stop, but a stop sign in for stackable access to and from. And then, of course, the county came up with an idea that maybe why don't you build a compressed diamond instead? That'll be more effective. And in fact, that's exactly what the state did. They built that compressed diamond, 135 and Highway 53, and it was primarily for how does the emergency service get access to and from along with regular traffic. So I think that's ripe for a revisit.
So I guess maybe I would just add that to the conversation, Matt, or Britt, or Mayor, or Chief, if you're, having conversations moving forward as you kind of dig into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Paulson. Anyone else? Okay, so it's been moved and supported to authorize staff to apply for the funding. You have the motion on there, so is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you for your patience, Matt.
You have no problem.
Very much, thank you kindly.
Thank you. Item number 5 is review the City of Virginia travel policy.
Okay, and as you were looking through the policy, I'll just make a comment that I personally am comfortable with the travel policy. I think I leave it, rely on staff to determine, whether those travel is authorized, whether it's within state, out of state, or out of the country, based upon need and individual circumstances, based upon what kind of activity is occurring there, and whether or not this is prudent for city business. So, but maybe I know we want to revisit this travel policy, maybe tweak it and add something to that. So I open that up for discussion. That's why it's on the agenda today, because there's a motion a while back to put this on the agenda. So anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns, or recommendations moving forward, or discussion items regarding our travel policy? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just think our travel policy should be updated so that we're specific about when there is spouses or family going with, when there is out of state or out of country, so we're consistent. Looking at other travel policies for other governmental agencies, they are similar to ours, but ours is very broad, and I think that we need to be able to come up with a policy that alleviates the need to bring it to the council when there are extraordinary circumstances. Going out of state, it's great, but I also would want to make sure that we're, if, for instance, the state of Minnesota, their policy talks about if it's cheaper to drive than to fly an airplane, but you leave a day earlier and it's still cheaper, then go ahead and do that. And I think we should be looking at just some specifics about how to make sure we are being consistent and we are allowing our staff the training they need, but also making sure that they're present and doing what they need to do. So that's my input. I know that our current policy was revised in 2022, in 2020, but there is a lot of things that have changed. I also would like to look at the incidental meal and expenses and make sure that's up to date. I don't know if it's changed. We're very specific about what we have in ours other than mileage reimbursement, which is based on the IRS. So I'd like to look at what the meal reimbursement rate is and make sure that we're up to date on that as prices increase, making sure that we're staying on top of that. Excuse me. So those are the two points that I'd like to make sure we're doing. The other thought I had was for training and which is travel. If we're going to pay for an employee or a member to go to a conference, and then for some not medical reason they don't go, we're kind of out that money, and I'd like to make sure that if we can, we are getting reimbursed or half reimbursement or something so that we can make sure that the money we're spending is money well spent on traveling and training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Paulson.
Mayor, Sherry, do we have set aside in each department's budget specific, like annual expectations for travel or based on previous years or anything like that?
In each department, there is a line item for travel, registration fees, education. So it's totally up to the department head when we're doing budgets.
Okay, so, and those are usually submitted then within our budgetary submission
Timeline,
period.
yeah.
And so most of the department heads kind of understand what travel will be coming up for their employees.
Right, and usually it's some departments that haven't traveled, like mine, we'll put a line item in there. because something could happen during the year that, hey, this is good education. Maybe it's online or an opportunity to travel now with COVID restrictions.
Sure. And I'm sure those things have changed accordingly. I'm okay with in-state or out-of-state. I'm more concerned about budget. Like, how do we know, what the reimbursement is? Like, how is it determined when it comes forward? And I don't know, maybe this is a Britt question, but I'm more concerned about the actual budget. Like, if somebody has a grant or, or some of it is out of state, and would it be necessary to be out of state? I guess I'd like to clean it up or see a little more, I wouldn't say consistency. I think we're pretty consistent in allowing employees to move. But to me, it's not necessarily about if it's in the state or in the country. My concern is about what the budget states. And if an employee comes forward and says, hey, I have a grant and I'm going to be learning this or doing this, and it's not in state, I think that's acceptable. And we don't really have those parameters really spelled out at all in our current policy, in our current updated policy from 2020. So is that something, is it, we always usually look at them from a budgetary standpoint, is that correct? Before they're approved?
We do, and I think if I may help clarify, Sherry, for you, is that, each department head puts together what their needs are for training and whether that training is available in-house or not. So if the travel is required, I think there's 3 criteria, and please correct me if there's more or that's not accurate. But there's career enhancement opportunities. So an individual wants to enhance their career, enhance their personal skills with respect to that's related to their particular job description. They may put a travel request in, and that goes to the department, and they determine whether or not this is needed, or this career enhancement opportunity benefits the department as well as benefits the employee. That's number one. Number 2 would be the mandatory training. So say there's, for example, there's some mandatory training to maintain your license to practice law enforcement, or your ALS license, or whatever the case may be, and there isn't any local training available, but the training is in state. So that's mandatory training in order to maintain a level of compliance. I'll give you an example as an investigator. When there was no local thing together, in order to enhance your ability to investigate certain types of crimes like homicide or things like that, that wasn't available. It was an in-state travel to another area, or on a few occasions out of the state, in order to enhance your promotional skills moving forward. And that was a departmental decision whether that was going to be beneficial for that particular career thing. And the last one is the trainer type of training. So if we send somebody to a facility outside the state of Minnesota or within the state of Minnesota, so one person goes out there, gets that training, can come back, and no other employee will have to go out there, because that's a train the trainer. That individual can now have the authority, the licensure, or the expertise to train other employees in that regard. Does that answer a little bit?
Yes, it does. If I just add to the fact that you had mentioned about grants. Grants are good. Anything that helps the budget is good. So,
And we do see a lot of our travel requests coming forward with a lot of grants from all departments that I've seen across, my tenure here. So I think our departments do an excellent job with that. So for me, I'm okay with the way this is, maybe just the adjustments for, like Counselor Johnson was stating, make sure the meal reimbursement is up to the current standard or whatever. But if there's grants available and that employee, whether it's in-state, out-of-state, I'm sure we go based on what's available for local training or close to local, and then it just keeps going broader if that's the case, and the education opportunity or the training opportunity is out-of-state, that's to be considered if it's not available in-state. But if grants are available, I'm okay with not necessarily putting any attached, I don't know, what layers, of criteria to meet in order to facilitate that training or education purpose. I'm okay with that. I don't know what other people are okay with, but I think it's really important to not only career enhanced, but those education credits, whatever is needed to maintain licensure. The city's always been really good at doing that, and I think our employees, they come back with a much more robust, I guess, as an employee being trained in to train other people, or with that experience, what they bring to our departments, I think is wonderful. So I don't want to, prohibit any of that, but I'm okay, as stated. I would just maybe look over the cost of meals, and I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Sure, Mayor.
Sherry?
Yes, the per diem rate usually is off the federal, for each, state and city, and there's a per diem rate that usually you follow for out-of-state travel. For in-state travel, a lot of times the conference you're going to will provide a lunch.
Thank you. And I do believe that, this is a travel policy was adopted in 2020 for this purpose. It was broad enough to give the department, or the department head or the city administrator the authority to approve these based upon their vetting of what's needed and whether this is a needed travel policy or travel request. And so that's signed by the supervisor, saying, yes, we need this. Discussion with the city administrators passed on to the city council under the consent agenda items to approve. And I think that works well. It's only when there's an anomaly taking place, like the example was the out-of-country travel, and the issue was, are you representing the city or whatever the case be? And so the city administrator, Britt, brought this for us because it was an anomaly for us to consider. But as you brought forth, Councilor Paulson, there are times where people have grants or there's personal expenses involved where it costs the city hardly anything in order to authorize a travel request that's going to enhance the career advancement opportunities and the ability to provide services to our community. That's something we have to vet out. And the other portion of that is when we have a travel policy that gives them the authority to do that, if it's not, they don't think it's necessary, it won't even get to Brit, or the department say, so this is not necessary travel. And within their budget, they have X amount of dollars to spend. They know for the most part what's mandatory training, what they're going to have to do for trainer. If they have a change in personnel where that person was trained and now is not going to be there anymore, is left, so they want to add that into their budget. That's all, vetted out through our city staff and with respect to that. So as far as the policy goes, I think we make sure that the per diem is in compliance with what's necessary in the mileage reimbursement, and we follow those guidelines as Councilor John has asked us to make sure that we know that. And I think we do, Britt, do we not? Make sure that, they're properly reimbursed for mileage and whatever. And then if it's driving is cheaper than flying, then that's a consideration you as well. So I'm fine with the travel policy the way it is, Councilor Freely.
Yeah, I think it's relatively comprehensive in terms of our expectations, but one thing I see missing would be an expectation for when you return from your staff development or your educational opportunity to share that with your colleagues in some capacity, even if it's a report form that you staple to your reimbursements, so that there's some documentation with regard to what you gained from that and what you can share for that with your colleagues and how it would benefit the city or that department. I would like to see that piece added to that in some regard.
I think that's a very good point. And when I worked on the Metro as a supervisor, that was the same thing when we sent somebody to training. They came back with a synopsis of what they learned and a word of report on what the benefit what they gleaned from that, and did attach that and gave it to their department head or their supervisor, who in turn was given to the city administrator, or in that particular case, it was the MAC administrator. And that went in the personnel file as well as in their training file. So that's a very good observation. Thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Paulson.
To tack on to that, I think Sherry, Pam, Britt, you've all been excellent at coming back when you guys have attended conferences and just sharing your experience with the council and with the community, what your experiences are or have been. So I think it's been great to hear. I mean, COVID really changed the way that a lot of the experiences took place, but you have all been very diligent in coming back and letting us know what your experiences were and what you've learned and, bringing that back into our government body. So I really appreciate that, and I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Britt, if I may, and Sherry, for your, and from the benefit of your staff, the requests of some clarification about the per diem and the mileage, and make sure that we're up to speed on that. But as far as changing any language in the travel policy itself, we have now, of course, on the agenda is to review the city travel policy. We now have reviewed it. Does the council have any action, or do you need action for us to direct staff to inform us of the per diem issue, or does that have to actually be in there? You don't need that, do you? Okay, so thank you. But in that case, we have reviewed the policy. We've had some significant discussion about some suggestions that staff will make sure that that gets accomplished. But is there any motion to be made to change any language in that policy moving forward? Seeing none, thank you very much. Can we just take a few minutes, take a quick break before we go to item number 6, 7, and 8 on the agenda? Okay, let's take a few minutes. Thank you. All right, let's get started once again, and we'll just wait a minute or so. John Sullivan had to go get some documents related to some of these things, so. Well, let's first, Britt, everybody ready? Okay, we're all here. Let's go to item 6 on the agenda, please.
Item number 6, review the OSHA COVID-19 proposed regulations. And Chief Lewis will speak very briefly on this one.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning. And very briefly is the key word here. You all know that the Supreme Court struck down the COVID mandate for businesses or employers of over 100 people last week. They did leave in place the Medicare/Medicaid ruling for healthcare facilities and what they call providers. Fortunately, as an EMS, we are not considered a provider, we're considered a supplier, so that doesn't apply to us. So I don't see any application for the proposed OSHA COVID regulations for employers of over 100 people. I see Brian nodding his head. Is there any questions about that? I think everybody breathed a collective sigh of relief of not having to deal with enforcing a very unpopular mandate.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson.
I guess my concern is the focus on businesses as opposed to public entities. My understanding is that the reason Medicare was included is because it's federal money. Cities receive federal money. So I'm just going to ask, and I know you will continue to monitor this very closely, because my gut tells me that little line between businesses and cities, public entities, is going to be one that's going to be crossed in the near future too. So that's my concern. I am grateful that we don't have to make decisions about it right now, but I don't think this has gone away for us, and I think that we will need to be very careful as we move forward.
And if I may, thank you, Counselor Johnson, the key word here is Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement. We don't get that in the city, so, do we?
So we don't directly.
No, so that was the key word of that decision, as outlined by the experts in the field over very media. It's Counselor Paulson.
I should clarify the Medicare/Medicaid. So a lot of our patients, 70% of our
Right.
patients are Medicare/Medicaid patients, and we are a supplier, meaning we service those patients, but we are not, under technical Medicare/Medicaid language, considered either a healthcare facility or a provider of Medicare/Medicaid, and that's how we are able to not be subject to that ruling.
Yes, thank you for that distinction. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. This letter was received within other correspondence from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, from Brandon Fitzsimmons from Flaherty and Hood. I had reached out to Brandon prior to the Supreme Court ruling to have a discussion, and the city has not provided any of these updates to our employees. So I don't know that there would be any reason that we would need, basically this document was to state, if you had already put out correspondence to your employees, that this was just an explanation of what had transpired within the Supreme Court. So I would actually make a motion just to receive and file this communication from Flaherty and Hood from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities.
All support.
Okay, moved by Counselor Paulson and supported by Counselor Bearable to receive and file the information disseminated by the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Britt, next item.
Thank you. Item number 7 is approve the 2022 taxi license for C&M Taxi.
I'll refer this to Pam. The question I have is, A, do they meet the requirements of the vehicles that they're authorized to have licensed? And do they meet all the requirements with respect to driver information, et cetera?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, they have submitted all their paperwork as of last Thursday. I did receive the insurance from the agent this morning, so they are okay. They are just waiting on their badges. And we do have some that will be coming in to get their badges and pictures and whatnot. So I just kind of wanted to get it on here ahead of time at the council meeting.
I have two questions for you with respect to this. So The first is, how much is a taxi license?
$25
$25 a year compared to?
per car.
Per car, compared to thousands of dollars per year in other entities, even at the airport. So that's pretty cheap, number one. Number two, my other question is that because they're a for-hire vehicle, even though it's private, but it's for hire, the public using it, is there a law that you're aware of, Brian, or anyone that's aware of, that prevents them from smoking in that vehicle? Is there any, under the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act, or is there anything that that prohibits that from happening? Maybe we could do some research on that and find out.
Mayor, I will do some research. It's, I haven't looked at that question in the past. I suspect there would be something, but I'll.
I think for hire, I think there's something in the rules about that, but when they're driving down the road with a cigarette dangling out of their mouth, that doesn't bode well, and some people don't want to operate there. So even though that's the only Texas we have, and they haven't been operating since January 1, it's nice to see that we have some level of for-hire service to bring people to and from areas where they don't have transportation. But those are a couple of the questions that I had. Thank you. So any other questions, comments, or concerns about the taxi? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve. Moved by Counselor Freely. Is there support? Support by Counselor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 8 is discuss property offer for parcels in the Public Safety Development Area, 110 8th Street South, 105 10th Street South, and 119 10th Street South.
And are you requesting this portion of the meeting be closed for discussion?
If the council so chooses, otherwise it's pretty self-explanatory. They've all been negotiated.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we can do this publicly, so looking for council action. Do we have a motion to close the meeting, or we keep it open? There's no motion to close the meeting? Okay, we're not required to close, but, okay, second request, is there a motion to close the meeting? Is there a motion to close the meeting? No motion to close the meeting. The meeting will remain open. Moving to item number 8. Is it John?
Thank you, Mayor. 110 8th Street South is the outlier of these three, if you will. That's the Robert Petron estate, which was dealt by probate and our city attorney, Brian Lindsay. 105 10th Street South was the Meredith McBride property. And 119 10th Street South is a David Ecke property. All these had an appraisal and then a review appraisal, which were all confirmed. And then there was all these people got the packets from the relocation expert, and they were explained all those things. And then they made an offer, and they have been, these three have been agreed on. These are all 10th Street, as you can see, on the southern edge of the property. So it would be recommended that these would be approved at the state they're at. If you have any other questions, let me know.
Okay, and do we need to do these individually? We do. Okay, thank you. So looking for discussion or council action regarding the parcel and public safety development area at 110 8th Street South.
I'll move the purchase agreement.
Councilor Johnson moves to approve that. Is there support?
I'll support, Mayor.
Support by Councilor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second parcel is 105 10th Street South.
Move the purchase agreement.
Move the purchase agreement to approve by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
Okay.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, the property at 119 10th Street South. Councilor Johnson moves to approve the purchase agreement, supported by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Freely.
Real quickly, I know we pre-budgeted for the purchase of these properties, and I just want to make sure that we're aligning ourselves with the approximate number that we had budgeted for, and that we're not paying in excess for any of these properties where we might get ourselves in trouble.
Counselor Freelieb, that is correct, and so far we are on budget from what we had allocated for the acquisition part of it.
Yep, thank you, Counselor Freelieb. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. There are no other items listed on the agenda. There's no number 9 for other items of concern. So our business here at the Committee of the Whole meeting is concluded, and we will stand adjourned. Thank you.